Hi, folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is Season 18, Episode 2. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Hi folks, great to have you with me. Hope you're really well. Thank you for joining me. Now, financial freedom, which is what most of us would aspire to, I think. It comes from building wealth for the future so that one day work is optional, right? But for many of us, we're not starting from zero, but we're starting from a minus figure. We're carrying day-to-day debt on credit cards, personal loans and the like, and we need to clear that before we can start to build. And so today is the ultimate guide to clearing down, paying off, eliminating your debt. All right, that's where we're going today. As usual, I'll read a review out at the end of the show, announce what we're going to be talking about next time. Important stuff to talk about for the Academy as well. Before any of that, though, remember this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management, who've been helping me out here on Meaningful Money for ages. So do check out what they're up to. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Thank you very much to them. Now, debt is much more than just a minus figure on our family balance sheet, if you like. It's a millstone around our neck. It weighs us down in our psyche. It can make us feel like we're never really moving forward, taking one step forward, 2 steps back, maybe. But really doesn't have to be this way. Debt can be eliminated systematically, but it's got to be understood and then corralled in the right way, and that is why we're here today. So this is designed to be, hopefully, the ultimate guide to debt elimination. Now, at the show notes, we got a workbook that you can download for free. There's checklists, a debt Snowball and debt Avalanche template. More on what that means in just a minute. Plenty more besides. Transcript of this episode as well, so you can read back the stuff that we've been talking about. And for the next 2 weeks, there's a special discount on the Financial Foundations phase of Meaningful Academy. So more at the end of the show and more at the show notes, which is the only link to remember. Everything you need is there. meaningfulmoney.tv/UG2, right? That's for Ultimate Guide, Episode 2. So meaningfulmoney.tv/UG2. If we're ready, let's dive in with everything that we need to know. Okay, everything we need to know is about providing context for the practical stuff. So we'll try to keep this fairly short. But firstly, not all debt is bad, right? Debt is a funny word. I think we've become somewhat desensitized to it. But in so doing, we've learned to rationalize debt as well. I had a guest years ago on the show who said, I love debt. Yes, he said that on this show, right? Now, he was talking about using debt to buy investment property, which is what most of us do. Most of us don't, have cash kicking around to buy property. So actually, that wasn't a bad comment. Perhaps it was a little bit of an unhelpful way of being communicated. So is debt bad or isn't it? Well, most debt is bad, but some of it isn't, in my view. And I've got a very clear distinction between good and bad debt. I'll get to that in just a minute. But for now, let's just agree. Some debt is good. Most, though, is bad. Okay? If we're happy with that, let's move on. Second thing we need to know is that debt is a massive psychological burden. It's really hard to overplay just what a burden debt can be. I don't have figures for this, but it's pretty well documented that money worries, including debt, are a large contributor to people taking their own lives. The threat of bailiffs knocking at the door to recover a debt, the shame of failing financially, these are huge weights around our neck. And even if the debt isn't actually that acute, it can be demoralizing never to feel like you're getting ahead because, when you get paid, all you're doing is filling up your overdraft back to zero and then you spend the rest of the month spending it back down again to minus 1,500 quid or whatever. No matter the size of the debt, its weight can be felt. It's like a ball and chain around your ankles, holding us back from achieving all that we could do if it wasn't there. When we owe people or companies money, we are making them richer, not ourselves. And that is reason enough not to take debt lightly. Why would we make other people richer than we want to make ourselves? Number 3, help is at hand. It's important to say, fairly near the top of the show here, that if you are absolutely buried in bad debt right now and you just feel like you're sinking below the surface, you're going to need to get help. Chances are you might not be able to help yourself if it's that bad, but there is no shame in that, folks. Okay, there is a way out of it. There are charities like CAP, which is Christians Against Poverty, Step Change. They will help you to negotiate with creditors, build repayment plans. Another option is PayPlan. It's not a charity, but it's funded by donations from the credit industry. So there are links to those 3 providers in the show notes. There are others available too. Definitely check out Citizens Advice Bureau as well. That's a good place to start when dealing with this stuff. But please don't bury your head in the sand and do nothing. It will not get better that way. Do reach out to somebody who can help you practically and start moving with you towards a better future right now. And then finally, what we need to know, there's no quick fix, right? If for you, it isn't that bad, the debt isn't bad, but you're resolved to beat it so that you can really start to move forward with your finances, then you need to know that there isn't a quick fix for this, right? It's going to take the most laser-focused effort you have ever applied, probably to anything, and almost certainly to your finances. Now, the method, which we're going to go to in a second, will show you how to beat debt, but don't consider things like individual voluntary agreements or bankruptcy as easy fixes. It really isn't as simple as just getting everything wiped off, walking away and starting again. Those processes may be an option for you, but they have far-reaching consequences for you and potentially for anybody living with you. So we need to resolve that we're going to get help if we need it and set our minds to the task ahead and not just look for easy ways out, right? It's not a quick fix. This is going to take some work. Now, if you haven't listened to last week's Ultimate Guide to Budgeting, you're going to need to do that in tandem with this week's guide. Last week, I showed you how to give each pound a job. This week, we're going to go into the detail of what that job looks like when it comes to debt reduction. Okay, so we know not all debt is bad. We know that debt has the power to weigh us down considerably. We know where to get help if things are really, really bad. And we're resolved that this won't be a quick or an easy process. Before we look at what we need to do, don't forget that free workbook. It's available from the show notes. There's a transcript available from there as well. The link is meaningfulmoney.tv/UG2 for Ultimate Guide Episode 2. And there's a special offer on Meaningful Academy Financial Foundations, which is where I really go deep and much sort of more distilled than I can ever do in a free weekly podcast. There's a special deal on the Academy, meaningfulacademy.com/specialFF for Financial Foundations. So meaningfulacademy.com/specialFF for more details on that. Let's now have a look at everything we need to do. Time to get practical. So firstly, you need to know your debt, right? Know the enemy. As I said, not all debt is bad, so we've got to understand that distinction between good and bad debt so that we know what our personal debt landscape looks like. So here is the simple distinction. Good debt is low interest and is used to buy things which appreciate, i.e. they go up in value, right? Good debt, it's low interest rate, used to buy things which appreciate, that go up in value. Bad debt is high interest and is used to buy things which go down in value. Simple distinction. So a mortgage to buy a property is a good debt because it's generally low interest and generally property prices increase in value over time. It is a generalization but that's generally the case. Using a credit card to buy a TV is bad debt because your TV is practically worthless the second you get it out of the box. At that point, it's a second-hand TV and the value of it is plummeted. And of course, the credit card itself will likely be attracting double-digit interest until you pay it off. So that simple distinction between good and bad debt will help you to differentiate as you go forward. Buy now, pay later plans. These are just the scourge of the high street, in my opinion, preying mostly on younger folks who don't know any better because we don't teach them to know better. Those schemes, Klarna and those sorts of things, buy now, pay later, definitely bad debt. Most debt to buy a car is bad. Cars always depreciate, unless you're buying a classic Ferrari, which probably if you're borrowing to do it, you're not. There are loads of different options, PCP, HP, lease purchase. Unless you can get a zero or very low interest rate on car finance, generally it's best avoided if you can help it. There are ways to buy cars without borrowing money to do it. It just might not be a fancy new car. Even insurance policy debt is bad because you usually end up paying double-digit interest rates to pay your car or your house insurance over a year. So even though the pounds and pence numbers might be quite small-ish, it's still money that you don't have to pay away. Right? Now, for what it's worth, I don't consider student loans to be bad debt. The interest rate is relatively low, and it has bought you an education which should reap dividends throughout life. Yes, that is a woefully simplistic view on things. There are actually different versions of the student loan system which are less favorable. Plan 2 is definitely more favorable than Plan 1. So you might need to take a view for yourself as to whether you see your student loan as bad debt or not. And finally, you need to know the distinction between secured and unsecured debt. So secured debt simply means that the debt is linked to a particular asset, usually a house or a car or something like that. And that if you fail to make repayments on the debt, that asset can be taken off you in satisfaction of the debt. So the loan company can actually come in and take the house off you. It's called a repossession. Or they can take your car off you if you don't pay the loans. With unsecured debt, that's not the case, but there are, of course, still ramifications if you don't pay. Right, so know the enemy. Know exactly what you've got and whether it's good or bad debt. Knowing that, we need to take a deep breath and write down all our debts. So that's step 2, list your debts. And there's a template for this in the workbook, which is available for free from the show notes. I suggest you use 4 columns. And this is crucial. Start with the debt which has the smallest balance. I'll explain why in a minute, but as you write these down in these 4 columns, which I'll give you in a sec, start with the smallest debt first, right? Write the name of the debt, that's the first column, the amount you owe, the interest rate, and then the minimum monthly payment. So do that for each bad debt that you've got. And then with the second smallest balance on the second line, the next smallest balance on the third line, and so on. And on the last line, you'll have the debt with the biggest balance outstanding, the biggest amount you owe. Okay? Smallest debt first, biggest debt last. Now, total up the columns, the amount outstanding and the minimum payments. Right? These might be scary figures, but at least now we know where we stand. We have an incredible capacity for burying our heads in the sand, not really getting our heads around exactly the numbers because we don't like numbers because there's nowhere to hide, right? Now, we need to understand that if we only make minimum payments on these debts, they're going to take forever to pay down. So when you've totaled up that minimum payment column, we are going to need to find more money than that each month to pay down the debt, okay? So be prepared. I'm just sort of easing you in gently. Oops, banged my microphone. Never mind. Now, before we go on, let's take a metaphorical step to the side and take stock. Now that we know where we are, we need to ask how we got here. How did our debt get to this point? We weren't born with it, so when did it start? Was there a trigger, or did we just drift and allow ourselves to get deeper and deeper into debt over time? As you've probably guessed, I'm no psychologist, but I think there is real value in trying to figure out what behaviors we might need to change or to reverse, so to undo the damage. If we don't do that, there is real danger that we'll revert to type and we'll just end up in debt again. So write down how it is you're feeling right now looking at those numbers. Are you stressed, anxious? Are you annoyed at yourself? Now flip this on its head. Imagine you've paid down your debt. You are debt-free, and you've got 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses in the bank, a nice cushion. How do you feel now? Right? Write those emotions down as well, but write them in the present tense, as if you've already achieved the debt-free status. Now, these 2 motivations, getting out of the feelings that you have now and aiming towards your one-day positive feelings, those are powerful motivations. Write them down because you will forget them, right? I do it all the time. So it'll be good to be able to look back and remind yourselves of how you feel right now and what your motivations are. So please don't skip this part. Be brutally honest with yourself. What are your triggers for buying things with debt? Do you reach for the credit card or your Amazon Prime account if you're feeling upset or hungry or bored? Do you reward yourself with big purchases for little wins Tell you what, we are so good at rationalizing things to ourselves. Personally, it took me years to work out that rewarding myself for eating well for a week with a Saturday binge of chocolate and crisps doesn't actually make much sense. Seriously, I'm quite bright, but for years I couldn't figure out why I wasn't losing weight and was just getting fatter. 5 or 6 days of really good eating, complete blowout of the weekend wasn't helping me. So don't lie to yourself, folks. Be honest, make a resolution, a pact with yourself, because you are the only one who can make a difference here. From today, things change. Remember, there's sheets in the workbook for this, and it will help you with this writing down of your emotions and setting your motivations. Number 4, in what we need to do, save a starter emergency fund. You might think that it would make sense to get straight into clearing the debt down. Let's really get aggressive and get going. But there is a job you need to do first, and that is to save a starter emergency fund. Now, the reason for this is to cover most likely eventualities without you having to go further into debt to cover them. So imagine 2 scenarios, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So you are serious about paying down your debt, and you're doing really well, and then out of the blue, you rear-end somebody at the roundabout. Right, and you've now got a £250 excess to pay on your car insurance. In the first of our scenarios, you just don't have the money to hand, so you dip further into your overdraft or you put the excess on a credit card. In scenario 2, you draw from your starter emergency fund and just move right along with your day. You haven't had to extend your debt, the very thing which you're now trying to pay down, and you can breathe much more easily. So what a starter emergency fund does is simply prevent you going backwards at the time when you're actually gathering momentum in a very positive forward direction. So ideally, your starter emergency fund should be between £500 and £1,000 in size, should be held in an accessible bank account, but not in your everyday spending or bills account. So just open another account. There's no limit to the number of accounts you can have, right? So just open another account for your emergency fund. Make sure you can get at it, but don't carry the bank card around with you. You might be tempted to spend the money on something which isn't an emergency. So where's the money going to come from? Well, for the time being, you're going to pay minimum payments on all your debts and scrape this money for your starter emergency fund together as quickly as you can. Remember when you wrote down the minimum payments on all your debts and I said that you'd need to find more than that each month to really make a dent? Well, the more that you're finding needs first to go into building up your starter emergency fund. So if your total minimum payment across all your debts is, say, £300 a month, and you've decided you're going to find £500 a month to pay down your debt, then that £200 extra is going straight into your starter emergency fund until it's between 500 and 1,000. Okay, Pete, which is it, 500 or 1,000? Well, I think that comes down to income. So if you're a low earner, low lifestyle, probably £500 will be enough to cover anything that's likely to come your way. If you're earning, say, I don't know, $25,000 a year or more, you'll probably want to aim for a higher emergency fund, more towards £1,000, as chances are your costs will be a little bit higher each month, and any surprises that come along might be a little bit bigger too. Now look everywhere for the money to get this emergency fund built. Take extra shifts or even a second job for a few weeks. Sell some stuff that you don't need. Just do whatever is necessary to get the money together as soon as you can. Aim for 3 months. There's a challenge. If you can get this starter emergency fund together in 3 months, that bodes very well for your debt payment. It might take a little longer than that. Don't worry about it too much, but a short target like that can really focus the mind. Right, number 5, consolidate if you can, but tread carefully. So when you look at your debts, you've got them listed down now, there may be an opportunity to consolidate to make things a little bit easier. That is, group them together. So for example, you might be able to take out an interest-free credit card. There are offers like that, 0% interest on your credit card for 18 months. And you might be able to shift multiple card debts onto that. Now, there will be fees for doing so, but chances are you may still be better off, especially if you're paying much higher interest rates on the other cards. So don't discount that as an option. But please don't consolidate using your mortgage. Really, that doesn't fix anything. Because it extends the debt over a much longer time, it makes you forget about it rather than actually putting the debt right. And for my money, there's just too much risk that in doing that, you'll just revert to bad habits, having just wiped the slate clean at a stroke. Of course, it isn't wiped clean, it's added to the debt. Take extra care when borrowing from family to consolidate debts. I've seen money get in the way of family relationships too often to think that this is ever going to be a good idea. So if a family member offers to help you out by lending you money to pay off debts, I would advise against it because there's a very good chance it'll destroy the relationship before it fixes your financial issues. You will feel guilty and edgy every time you're around them. That'll really take the shine off family gatherings. You'll feel like you're being judged every time you show up in a new t-shirt because that's money you could have paid them back more quickly with. Now, everyone is different. Every family is different. So make your own call on this. But my general rule is never to borrow from or lend to family. If you must do it, I suggest that you draw up a formal agreement and repayment schedule and to pay interest. Nominal it might be, but the lender then is getting something out of it. So tread really carefully when consolidating. Avoid family debt and mortgage consolidation. And make sure you check the T's and C's of any 0% balance transfer credit cards. Don't make your situation worse inadvertently. Okay, number 6, roll the debt snowball. Okay, this is, to my mind, the most effective way to clear debt that I've ever come across. So pull out your list of debts that you wrote down, listed with the smallest outstanding balance first. And by now, you should have identified how much each month you're going to put against your debt on top of the minimum payments. So this method is called the debt snowball. And you know how you start to roll a snowball, it starts really small and then it gets bigger because it gathers more snow on every roll until you've got a snowball big enough to act as a snowman's body, right? Just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what's going to happen with your debt repayments. And it works like this. Very simple. You will pay minimum payments to all of your debts except the smallest one. And then all of the rest of your debt-busting monthly budget you pay against the smallest debt until it's gone. Simple. Minimum payments on everything except for the smallest debt and pay as much as you can against that one until it's gone. Then you move on to the next smallest debt. And now you'll have all the money that you were paying against the smallest one to put against the next smallest, plus the minimum payment you were already making there. Snowball just got a little bit bigger. When each debt is paid off, close the account, cut up the credit or store card, call the bank and close your overdraft. Don't give yourself the option of building the debt you've just paid off back up again. Imagine how demoralizing that would be. Make it impossible by closing the accounts. So you keep doing that. You keep working through your debt, smallest first, until eventually by the time you get to your last debt, your entire monthly debt payoff budget is being directed there. The snowball is now at its largest and it's having its biggest effect. So why pay off the smallest debt first? Surely it makes more sense to pay off the debt with the highest interest rate first. Well, it depends what you mean by sense, right? It makes the best financial sense, for sure. But money is, for most people at least, a psychological, behavioral, emotional issue rather than a problem of maths. For most of us, if we really understood the maths behind debt and the inverse of that, which is the maths behind wealth building, we would be much more disciplined about our financial management than we are. But, you know, if you feel like you are more motivated by maths than emotion, then the next point is going to help you in just a sec. But for most of us, the quick win of paying off a small debt quickly is of incalculable psychological benefit. That quick win is seriously motivating, right at a time when we want to be motivated to the max. That's why I think the debt snowball, smallest debt first, is the most effective. I know how people work, right? But whenever I talk about the debt snowball, that was made popular, by the way, by American money management legend Dave Ramsey. I always get some people emailing, complaining that it just makes no sense to pay off the debts in order of size rather than interest rate. Again, behavioral sense trumps financial sense, in my opinion. But in case you're one of these people who really gets the numbers and wants to do it that way, then you need to ride the debt avalanche. Works pretty much the same way as the debt snowball, but instead of paying the smallest debt first, you pay off the highest interest rate debt first, while paying minimum payments on everything else. Now, you will almost certainly pay less interest overall doing it that way. Not always, but usually. But arguably, I think you're more likely to fall off the wagon, but I have no sort of scientific evidence to support that. I think it very much comes down to the way that you're wired. The vast majority of us, I reckon, are wired for those quick wins, which is why the snowball is so effective. But if you're more motivated by the maths and the numbers, then go for the debt avalanche and pay the highest interest rate debt first. Same spud, only mashed, as we say in Yorkshire. Number 8, keep going, but prepare for setbacks. Now, when Dave Ramsey talks about paying off debt, he talks about Murphy, of Murphy's Law. And Murphy's Law states that what can go wrong will go wrong. Here in the UK, we're more likely to call it Sod's Law. Whoever Mr. or Mrs. Sod was who coined that law, I've no idea, or how they lived with such an unfortunate surname. But chances are that paying down debt is going to take a while, probably multiple years. But the snowball or avalanche methods give you the best chance of clearing the debt as quickly as possible. And you'll also find that the process becomes a little bit addictive. So you'll find yourself looking for more money down the back of the sofa to stack against the debt. You'll be asking for extra shifts and all sorts just to accelerate the process. But along the way, you will have setbacks. Sod's Law says something will happen and it will set you back. Now, hopefully, the starter emergency fund that you built will shield you from most of those, particularly if they come in the form of unexpected bills. So let's say that happens. You are happily rolling the debt snowball and the head gasket blows on the car. Funny how it's always the car that costs money, isn't it? Well, that's a few £100 worth of work that needs doing. It's frustrating, but you've got the money set aside to get the work done. So happy days. But what happens now? Well, at this point, your new top priority is to top up the emergency fund back to where it needs to be. Now, that means you might need to pause the debt snowball for 2 or 3 months. You go back to making minimum payments on all your remaining debts, and any extra that you've got every month to put aside is paid back into your emergency fund. Essentially, you're paying back your debt to yourself, to your emergency fund. They say that bad things come in threes. It's almost certainly nonsense, but you don't want to be caught short with an emergency fund which is short of cash if another unexpected bill comes along. Some of your setbacks, of course, will be self-inflicted. Right? Don't beat yourself up, but don't be too soft on yourself either. Self-talk such as, you've worked really hard, you've cleared down a really good amount of debt, you deserve a bit of a blowout, just go shopping. That sort of self-talk is really not going to help you in the long run. Remember the motivations you had at the start of the process. Check back to the sheet where you wrote them down. Refocus, get your head down, and don't use debt to make yourself feel good. It's completely counterintuitive. Find other more healthy ways instead. But if Sod's Law happens, you've got your starter emergency fund. Concentrate then on topping that back up to where it should be, and then begin rolling the snowball again. It'll be a short-term setback, but the focus that you've got will really help you to get back on the wagon and move forward. Okay, number 9. When you're debt-free, finish your emergency fund. So eventually you're going to get to a point where you're making the last payment off your debt. And man, this is going to feel so good. You'll be able to hold your head up high and know that you did this. You did it. You took control, forced your behavior and your money to do your own will. Man, you have done a good thing. On the Dave Ramsey Show in the US, which is a radio show which is syndicated all across the country, people call in every day to give their debt-free scream over the phone. So we can be a bit more British and reserved about it if you like, or not, whatever. But you should definitely mark the occasion because you are now very different to the majority of other people in the country for whom debt is just an everyday part of life. For you, though, it's past history and you're not going that way again. Yep, you might still have a mortgage, student loans, but those are good debts, remember. And the skills that you have learned getting to this point are now going to help you build wealth and fast. But first things first, we need to top up our emergency fund into a fully funded emergency fund. And that's going to add up to somewhere between 3 and 6 months worth of your regular monthly expenses. So use your budget to work out your minimum standard of living. So if you had to, you could survive on X pounds per month and still keep the lights on, food in the fridge, get to work, etc. Might not be a full life, but you're able to survive. Take that figure and multiply it by between 3 and 6 to work out what your fully funded emergency fund should be. Again, is it 3 months or 6? Well, I tend to say that if you believe your job is fairly secure, then you can probably get away with 3 months. If you're self-employed, or if you think your job might be vulnerable in any way, then err towards the 6 months, have more behind you. It'll also come down to your own risk tolerance. Too close to the wire, how close to the wire do you want to be? So I'm recording this in October 2020. We're about 7 months into the coronavirus pandemic at this point, and easily the number one subject of emails that I've had in recent months has been to say that people are super grateful that they had an emergency fund in place and thanking me for going on about it so much. It can be really tempting, having achieved such an amazing result with your debt, to want to move straight on to the sexy stuff like investing and pensions. Yes, folks, listeners to this show find investing sexy, and we're not ashamed to admit it. But don't rush ahead, right? Having got back to zero, that is, you don't owe any bad debt to anyone anymore, you need to lay your foundations now before you start to build. The emergency fund is part of that, and next week we're going to be talking about the rest of the foundations you need to lay on which you can build wealth for the future. So top up your emergency fund. Use the tracker in the workbook to help you stay focused. Get it to a figure that you're happy with, and then we can start to look forward. Okay, I imagine that by now you're keen to get going and nail your debt over the coming months and years. You'll also be starting to realize this is going to require some big changes. So this is where you're going to need to seek some support and ignore the haters, because these big changes might mean you're going out with your friends a bit less, right? It might mean uncomfortable conversations with family members about budgets for Christmas presents, things like that. In short, you're going to get some pushback on this, and quite possibly from people who are close to you, right? Maybe you have to tell your friends that the new budget means that you can only go out with them once a month rather than every weekend because you're trying to clear down your debt. They're going to call you boring. They're going to tell you that you should live for today because you might be dead tomorrow. They'll laugh and they will talk about you behind your back while they are out having a good time without you. But let's be under no illusion, though. They are saying all these things because your decisions has called their way of living into question, and nobody likes that. You putting the spotlight on your own debt has, in their minds, placed a similar spotlight on their own debt situation, and they might not yet be ready to tackle it. So that means we need to be gracious when people push back against us in this. Don't be the one to burn bridges, right? After all, if you are successful with this, it's just going to be writ large all over your face. The mental and emotional anxiety that is lifted when you become debt-free is really hard to hide. And friends who knew you before will see a difference, I'm telling you, and they will ask you about it. And then that is your cue to point them to this podcast and the video and to help them as much as you can. But right now, though, you're where they will be. You're at the other end. You're at the start of the journey, and you should really actively seek support in the process. So maybe you know somebody who has cleared their debt, or someone who, as far as you can tell, has it pretty much together, financially speaking. Reach out and ask them for their support. Ask them to check in with you every other week to see how you're doing. Tell your family members, those who you like and trust anyway, tell them what you're doing and ask them to make it as easy for you as possible. Share your wins with them. Every time you pay off one debt, you can celebrate, and they can celebrate with you. There are some great Facebook groups too, so you can definitely search for those in Facebook. Meaningful Money has got a Facebook group at meaningfulmoney.tv/community. And then there are private Facebook groups as part of Meaningful Academy, and that's for those who are super focused and looking to move forward with this. The Academy is a great place for you to go, and more on that in a minute. But look for any help you can find. It's easier with more than just yourself, right? Send me an email. Let me know your plans, okay? I'll help if I can. Okay, folks, in summary then, let me just hammer this point home. By clearing debt and not living as if it's a necessary and unavoidable fact of life, you are being countercultural. Get you debt-clearing hippie. Seriously, though, you are now carving a completely different furrow to most people in the Western world for whom debt payments are as much a part of life as breathing. Like I said, the skills you develop in this early phase of your financial journey will serve you incredibly well when you start wealth building. Don't try to balance debt payment with investing at the same time. I get asked about it all the time. Why not just pay down your debt and keep a couple of £100 a month to pay into a stocks and shares ISA? Then I'm winning, yeah? I just think it's splitting your focus. You are far less likely to win that way. More likely when things start to go south, when Sod's Law kicks in, you might need to take money out of your investments, and it might be the wrong time to do that. I think you're more likely to lose if you split your focus. Laser focus is your watchword over the coming months and years while you pay your debt down as quickly as possible. Write it on your fridge, set it as your computer and iPhone wallpaper. Did I say iPhone? I meant phone, obviously. Whatever. Stay strong, though, and don't forget, workbook for this episode is available at the show notes. meaningfulmoney.tv/UG2 for ultimate guide number 2. meaningfulmoney.tv/UG2. And I hope you get on with it. I hope you get on well, and I wish you every success in paying down debt. You could totally ring me up and give me your debt-free scream. Probably have to call it something different for legal reasons. But you know what? I love to hear from people when they say that they've paid down debt. Had a conversation with a long-time listener this week. You know who you are, mate. I won't name you, obviously, but he told me how he had paid down tens of thousands of pounds of credit card debt. Amazing story. I kid you not. There was something in my eye at the end of the conversation, because what an amazing story of radical focused action. So let me know how you get on. Send me an email via the website. Okay, and to celebrate this season of Ultimate Guides, I'm doing a special offer on Meaningful Academy, which is my most focused work, really, to help you to move forward with your finances. And the first 3 weeks of the Ultimate Guide series, we're in week 2 now, they lend themselves very much to the financial foundations phase of the Academy, which is for folks who are getting started. So there are video guides, calculators, workbooks, lessons about budgeting, debt elimination, understanding the basics of life insurance and investing, everything that you need to get your finances off on the right foot. So there's a Facebook group there, actually, meant to say, so you can ask questions in a safe place. It's a private group from folks who are in a similar position to you. And obviously, I'm in the group as well, so I can answer questions where I can. To find out more, go to meaningfulacademy.com/specialFF. So that's for financial foundations. So meaningfulacademy.com/specialFF. It's on the screen as I speak. And this special price will expire at midnight on the 3rd of November 2020. It's a one-off course. It's not a regular subscription. meaningfulacademy.com/specialFF. Go check it out. Hope to see you on the inside. Okay, here's a review from Scotty Scotland McScotty. McScotterson, sorry. So Scotty Scotland McScotterson. I think he's proud. Headlined, Absolute Godsend. I'm 29, beginning my journey towards mastering control of my personal finances and my long-term plans for the future. Pete's podcast is so incredibly valuable for someone at any stage on their financial journey who wants to educate themselves and make more informed decisions. I trust him completely and feel more confident forming my plans. Scotty Scotland McScotterson. Thank you for your trust. That really stood out to me, actually. There's a lot of charlatans online, okay? And, yes, I'm a chartered financial planner. I've got the bits of paper. But hopefully 10 years of doing meaningful money have shown you that I'm committed to you all and, your greater financial health. So, Scotty Scotland McScotterson, thank you for your trust. I take it unbelievably seriously, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you. And thank you for your review. If you want to do the same, leave me a review wherever you're listening to this. If you can go to meaningfulmoney.tv/love, just like Scotty Scotland McScotterson did this week, then you can leave me a rating or review, and it helps others to hear about the show because it keeps me near the top of the rankings. Okay, now next week's Ultimate Guide is going to be a guide to life insurance, though I might call it something different. Personal protection, something like that. Conjures up images of massive bouncer dudes either side of me while I walk into a club. So not me. But I'll think of what to call it by next week, okay? But essentially, it will enable you to build a solid foundation on which to build wealth for the future. And folks, that's it for this session of the Meaningful Money Podcast for this Ultimate Guide. I hope it's been helpful. These are long. What are we on? 41 minutes. Somewhere thereabouts. So thank you so much for joining me. Questions, comments, meaningfulmoney.tv/UG2. Hope you enjoyed it, folks. I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.